Hello and welcome once again to Superconnectivity. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is my right-hand man,
Phil, fill me in, Parrish.
Hey, Phil. Glad to have you here. Glad that you're always filling me in on all the stuff I forget. Okay, kind of big news tonight coming up in the world of Southgate Media. Phil, Lilith, Tyler, and I are starting our own new channel here at Southgate Media called Capes and Lunatics. Don't know who the Cape is, don't know who the Lunatic is, but I am calling and right now. Dibs on and. We're going to be setting this up. You can like us on Facebook already. You can follow us on Twitter. I don't know what we're tweeting yet, but we're going to get around to that. And this is going to be our new one-stop shop for all the genre fiction that you might like, whether that's video games, movies, comic books, novels. You know, I'm sure there are some people ready to talk about muggles and snapes and things of that nature, of which I know nothing, but apparently the kids today eat up with a spoon. So this is a new thing we're going to be doing soon. It's gonna launch in June, but we are hyping it now. And when we're there, you're going to get all of the podcasts that Phil, Tyler, Lilith, and I are on the Capes and Lunatics feed. So if you're sick of getting people who aren't Phil, Tyler, and Lilith on your feed, but you got to get those other idiots on your feed just to get the channel you like, now you'll be able to go to one channel just for the good stuff.
That's right. And so, I mean, some of my other shows are gonna probably it won't be the same form, but I'm pretty sure Superconnectivity is gonna stay in this same form, right, Charlie? Over there.
Well, actually, one thing I want to start doing more on Superconnectivity is talk fan theories.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've been making it much more of a Marvel newscast, and that's cool, because that's where fan theories evolve from. And certainly we can take the fan theories from the Marvel news, but when I first envisioned Superconnectivity, it was about my insane fan theories. And I want to start talking more and more about fan theories, about the fan fiction that's out there that people have come up with to explain away ideas. And I'd like to get you, the listeners, who have crazy fan theories yourself about why Peter Parker can do this or that or the other, or why Superman can shave, whether it's stuff that you know has actually already been made canon in the books, or whether it's stuff that you've always wondered and thought about. Sort of like how I think Ms. Marvel is secretly the most powerful person in the modern Marvel universe, even though she doesn't even know it yet. Right along there with Boulder as the two sides of that omnipotent coin.
Oh my God, Charlie! Yeah. I was just discussing with Rob today about maybe doing a new blog to go along with this new podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, at least every couple of weeks, would you like to discuss or answer questions or discuss fan theories on there?
Well, I, of course, would love to. I'd love to do it on my actual blog that is part of my email address. I need more time. And this is actually the reason we're doing this, because basically Phil realized that Phil, who's on way more podcasts than I'm on, I'm on like 4, and I find myself stretched to the limit. And Phil's on like 42. And he just said, you know what, maybe I need to cut back a little. And
I've just seen how others do it, and I'm just like, we're diverting all our energies in like 20 different directions. I'm just like, if we're going to do all this work, why don't we just funnel it into one direction and basically create the four of us create our own brand where right now it's like, Superconnectivity is like your brand, but like Marvel Roundup, Marvel's in there. You really can't monetize. Well, we're not going to monetize it, but I mean, we really can't claim Marvel as our own.
No, I understand. And for those of you worried, I know for myself, I'm still going to be doing all the Netflix casts with Maz. I'm still going to be doing Gamma Cast with Rosemary, 80s Music Girl. So we are still going to do the little casts, but we want to sort of make things more centrally located for our talents. And I hope you guys appreciate that and not think this is just us being vain, egotistical jerks.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, I've always said that the title Professor is a meaningless honorific, which is why in X-Men comics you hear Professor Kitty now. I don't think that girl graduated high school. I'm just going to say it right there. She may be brilliant. She may know a lot of stuff. I don't think she actually has a degree. But I don't have a degree either. But you don't have to have a degree to be a professor because you're just professing. Okay, let's move.
She got one of those. She got. I was gonna say she got one of those funky Xavier diplomas.
That's a fake school. That's like Trump University. It's like, hey, join Xavier University. I'll teach you mutant powers. You know, are you maximizing your mutant powers? If not, come to Xavier University. My school for gifted youngsters teaches you all how to be X's men. I don't know. Professor Xavier's from Brooklyn now, but there you go. That is the X-Men if Professor Xavier did not come from old money. Moving right along. Okay, so speaking of fan theories, and this isn't even really a fan theory. This is just a fan rant. So there's a lot of bees and a lot of bonnets right now, and this is forced a bee into my bonnet about Secret Empire. Now, Marvel got this. Okay, so here's what I'm going to tell you. About a year ago, Marvel started having fun with Hydra. And doing this fun gag about, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we were secretly Hydra? I think this is somewhat tied into this idea in the MCU with Hydra had infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. and Winter Soldier. Ward was secretly Hydra. And so they started doing all these gags about, maybe we're Hydra. And immediately some people started going, oh, Hydra is actually Nazis, and how can they do this and that, da. And, but of course, even though, yes, Hydra technically evolved from Baron Strucker, who was a Nazi, and it was meant to be this pastiche for this evil fascist government, or this evil fascist underground organization, fifth columnists, whatever you have. It was basically a terrorist organization known as Cobra. They gave it that real world tie to the idea of Nazism because the Nazis, as I've said many times, were the closest the world ever knew to supervillains because they dressed so nice. They were very comic booky in their creation, and so that lent itself to the young comic book writers who were creating things to want to play off of that. But by the time you got to the 60s, it didn't make any sense to have it still be Nazi Germany, and besides, you couldn't actually sell comic books with swastikas in Germany, so if you wanted to make money off of these things internationally, you kind of had to have non-committal characters, and so you created Hydra. Just to give you the business and marketing aspect of everything on this. But a few years, but even then people were upset about Marvel marketing with Hydra, saying because they were reading too much into it. They were reading way more into it than anyone was really intending, which is always a problem with comic books. Comic books can be deep. Don't get me wrong. I have sat there and spoken about how deep comic books are all of my life. But sometimes a seven-headed serpent is just a seven-headed serpent. But that's my take. But anyway, but here's the thing. So Marvel basically, for those unaware, Marvel did what's called a heel turn in the biz. See, we're used to face turns. Face turns are very common, which is a villain finds the goodness within him and turns to the right side and decides to fight for truth, justice, and equality. Sandman has done this. Even Zemo has done it a few times. Honestly, weirdly enough, we've had Nazis turn good. But the idea of a good guy turning Nazi is apparently an anathema to people, as if that never happens in real life. And this is what I think is the crux of my complaint here, Phil. Hydra aren't the good guys in Secret Empire.
Mm-mm.
And it's weird because it's something I kind of suddenly realized today. It's like, oh, they all think Hydra are the good guys because they don't read the books. So they don't know that Hydra are still the bad guys just because Steve Rogers is leading Hydra. You know, it's like they didn't suddenly become good guys because Steve Rogers did a heel turn. No, Steve Rogers became very, and you can say, oh, my childhood is ruined. Yeah, my childhood was ruined when Andre the Giant sold out to Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, okay? Don't tell me about childhoods being ruined. When Andre the Giant, the greatest wrestler of all time, still breaks my heart to think about it, did a heel turn and sold the championship belt to Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. This is back when $1 million was a lot of money, kids. So just so you understand why, like, if it was done today, he would be the $1 Billion Man. Then he was just the $1 Million Man. But we all thought $1 million, that's a lot of money, you know. That's how desensitized we've become to money in this world. But that, my friends, was a heel turn. And as a young child, it soured me on wrestling because I couldn't comprehend it. I couldn't understand it. And actually, then when Hulk Hogan beat Andre the Giant to win back the belt, I was like, okay, well, now this is just fantasy. Wrestling isn't real, clearly. Hulk Hogan, I love Hulk Hogan. He's a great guy. He's a fantastic person, I'm sure. Well, actually, from what I understand, he's kind of a jerk. But you know what? I'm not going to judge him for being a jerk. I know a lot of jerks, and a lot of jerks are actually not horrible people. You know. But Andre the Giant was the Giant. He was the world's. He was more powerful than anyone. He was a better wrestler. He actually was a very skilled wrestler. Even beyond just having that power behind him, he actually knew what he was doing. And you know, he could win any. He was the guy for whom kayfabe was built. You know, he could win or he could lose based on what he felt like doing. And that's what I loved about Andre. And also, he was a big guy with a big gut, and I was a little kid with a big gut. So, you know, I felt an association with him. You know. Also, I knew he was European, and my dad was European, and, you know, it's that whole thing, you know. When you're a first-generation immigrant, Andre the Giant meant a lot to you, you know. Moving right along.
But anyway, before we get too far out of this, you're saying about how, you know, why people are just thinking Hydra might be good guys now because Steve Rogers is at the head of it and stuff. But weren't you the one screaming for weeks that, oh, maybe Steve Rogers is leading a kinder, gentler Hydra?
Well, yes, I was. And, you know, but that's the thing about it. You know, here's the thing. Marvel makes really good villains. Honestly, I don't know why DC gets told about how great their villains are. Their villains are all pretty obviously sociopaths. If you're feeling sympathy for the Joker, there's something wrong with you. But quite frankly, if you feel sympathy for Loki, if you feel sympathy for Doctor Doom, that's because he's a really well-written character who's charismatic and intelligent and makes you question what is right and what is wrong. And that's what a good written villain should do. You know? And that and for what it's worth, that's the beauty of this the arc of it, is that you do get seduced by Steve Rogers because he is everything you want him to be, even as he is ultimately evil. You know, and that's the thing, is he is evil from his inception. And here's the thing about it: they didn't hide his evil. They didn't hide it. He was up front, heel turn from the first Hail Hydra as he pushes Jack Flag out. You know, you get some hand-wringing here and there to make you think, oh, maybe he's not so bad a guy. You know, turn us all into a Harley Quinn with our own Mr. J as Captain America becomes our Mr. J. If you're sitting there saying, he's not a bad guy, sometimes he doesn't hit us. You know, but that is why it is such a powerful story. And I think the people that are most complaining are people who aren't reading and who don't read. I think there are people who are just mad that you're having a nuanced portrayal of a fascist, you know? And if you want to call him a Nazi, go right ahead. But you know what? Nazis were nuanced too, you know? I mean, that's the crux of it. You know, the real horror of Nazism isn't that a bunch of extra-dimensional monsters from another dimension came to Earth and started doing evil. It's that regular people started doing evil. And, you know, you want to you want to know the real darkness of Nazis, why Nazis are so scary. It's because very little of what they did was that outside of the norms of the world at the time. The English certainly had built racialist and horrific regimes over the years. And they certainly believed in white supremacy. And of course, the United States, half of the country, still to this day believes in white supremacy. So, it's not like you could really say, what was being done was that outside the norm. We've evolved beyond that. At least we try to think we are. We try to dress ourselves up in robes to say we are beyond that, and we should because we want to be beyond that. But to act like that's not the world, Steve Rogers grew up in a segregated world. That he, up until this point, wasn't a Nazi is the strength of his character. But you raise him in a fascist world of Hydra, that he suddenly starts exhibiting Nazi-ish behaviors. I mean, that's what it is. He's from his history got changed, his world got changed.
Mm-hmm.
And that new alternate world is informing him, but he is the villain. He isn't the hero of Secret Empire. Any more than Dr. Doom was the hero of Emperor Doom, or Norman Osborn was the hero of Dark Reign. With Dark Reign, I certainly fell for the charismatic the charismatic Norman Osborn from time to time, Norman Osborn was a very interesting and intriguing character. And the way they portrayed him as this conflicted man trying to do good is a beautiful thing. But, that's the truth of it. Any villain is a guy trying to do good. Dr. Doom is trying to do good. And Dr. Doom is as much a fascist monster as Steve Rogers. And folks love him. If anything, what Marvel has done is they've exposed our own love of the villain. Not for nothing. If had done, not for nothing, DC sold, gave out President Lex merchandise. DC has given out lots of Joker merchandise over the years. No one bats an eye. But suddenly, because we're not just promoting villains, but now we had a heel turn, now people are getting upset.
Yeah,
but I know the political climate informs that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But people have always, at least in this genre, liked popular villains. Because look at the '90s. Harley Quinn and Deadpool were basically, well, maybe not so much Deadpool, but they were closer to villainy than they were heroes. And now they're straddling that anti-hero thing now.
Well, yeah, but that's always, people are always much more forgiving of a face turn than a heel turn.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, if you only do face turns, you aren't being real and you're not being honest. Because, heel turns happen too. Mm-hmm. Many a great man is driven to evil by the situations in which they find themselves in. And it is the hope that there's always a redemptive arc, but sometimes it's not a redemptive arc. Sometimes the arc is actually one of damnation. Sometimes it's a damnable arc. And the arc is of a good man brought low who embraces it, who doesn't get a redemption because he does not feel that redemption is the path.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is fiction. I am perfectly comfortable if we never get classic Steve back. Or if our face turn on Steve rests far more on his disillusionment with Hydra than a mystical MacGuffin fix.
Well, you know what? I was thinking about this week when everyone was talking. Do you think maybe they're gonna, I don't know, I think some of the things that people don't like about Steve Rogers is because he grew up in a simpler time, that he seems almost like too much of a goody two-shoes at times before this happened. So do you think maybe he's not going to get put back completely, but he's going to get put back more to a heroic side, but maybe with more of an edge?
Entirely possible. To be honest with you, here's what I'm going to say. I've never felt that Cap was a goody two-shoes. Cap was always an idealist.
Yes.
The problem with this is that his heel turn stems upon a different set of ideals.
Mm-hmm.
And his ideals now are, like I said, probably more closer to maybe what William Burnside embraced, which was this, ironically, almost a collectivist ideal to strengthening society. The idea that, well, we have to work together because we are building a nation kind of concept.
Yeah, but I mean, Burnside, in those first appearances, he was like straight up and up racist. Steve's not a racist.
Yeah. Well, okay. So it's funny thing about Burnside, because first off, you have to remember that when Burnside first appeared, he actually wasn't Burnside. He was Steve Rogers back in the 50s. And if you ever read the reprints of Captain America Commie Smasher and his attitude towards those red Chinese villains he was fighting, it was pretty. You can see where William Burnside, maybe he was a lunatic, came from.
But even like when him and Jack Monroe woke up, what was that, 60s or in the 60s or 70s? Oh, they were hardcore racist.
Well, yeah, but that's because they were informed by the 60s. They were informed by this not for nothing, by the same reactionary zeal that is informing the current late teens.
Mm-hmm.
There is this idea that, here's essentially what happened when Barack Obama got elected president. Just to give you a little quick crash course in what happened. People that had remained silent out of fear stopped being fearful because they saw that someone not like the majority got elected president, and suddenly they didn't feel that they had to keep their mouths shut. This bothered a significant number of people who were part of that old majority that enjoyed people quietly going along to get along. And so now suddenly people didn't feel like they were not. People suddenly felt like full citizens. They started speaking up about ill treatment that they were experiencing. Suddenly people got upset by that. This is not dissimilar to what happened in the 60s, where it wasn't even because there was a positive catalyst. It was just people had gotten sick of all the negative catalysts that they had dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
So, in what happened in the 60s was essentially the yoke of racism had cracked. People got sick of just dealing with it, whether it was racism, sexism, homophobia. And so suddenly in the 60s and 70s you get people rioting, whether it's the Stonewall riots or the Detroit riots, or there's never been a women's riot, because honestly, if there was ever a women's riot, that's half the country. We're doomed. But the fact of the matter is, there have been revolutions and uprisings and these efforts for a while, and people get scared by them, who maybe don't necessarily see themselves as the enemy, but they certainly are people who are in favor of the status quo, which is this idea that, hey, I'm personally not going to hate you because of who you were. But I don't want you acting like the world is being ill to you, because that makes me have to think too hard about how the negativity you've experienced has been a positive for me. When you discuss the idea of white privilege, people dislike it because they don't like to think of themselves as being privileged by others' hatreds. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a cisgendered, heterosexual white male, you have been given a leg up in life, because there are enough people who hate people who aren't heterosexual cisgendered white males that you get that not being part of the hated group advantage. And it's hard for people to comprehend, because if you're not part of the hated group, you don't understand that people hate them per se, or you assume that the people who hate them are such a small minority that it doesn't matter. And arguably, maybe they are, except unless you're part of that group. It's sort of the terrorist conundrum. Terrorism is a very minor concern, really. The amount of people who die from terrorists or are injured by terrorists in the U.S., as an example, is very low. That doesn't mean we should simply stop being vigilant about terrorism. But it also means that maybe we should be intelligent about what causes terrorism and from whence terrorism comes. And if you try to make it too reductivist, that's when you make mistakes on combating things like terrorism. I don't know. Anyway, getting back to comic books. My real point is in all of this is that Captain America is the villain of the Empire, of the Secret Empire story. And Marvel has never suggested he wasn't. Even as a reader, I was hoping he wouldn't be. And I think that's the thing, is like we didn't want him to be the villain. We wanted some kind of redemption. But to want him to have a redemption meant that you had to somehow justify Nazism. And I get that upsetting people, but that's fan theory, not what Marvel is writing. So you can't be sitting here judging Marvel because, as a fan theorist, I'm saying, well, maybe there's this other aspect to this. Maybe there's this greater good. Maybe there is this positivity of fascism in a world that is filled with superhumans. And that's the thing, is like, if you want to have a complex conversation, there's a really interesting complex conversation to have. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to have complex conversations. People don't want to deal with having to think of these issues in that context.
I think the other problem too is, people, with their entertainment, people like to escape like these complex issues in the real world, and there aren't figures in the real world who are complete, they aren't all good. And with all the crap that's going on now, people are just looking for an escape. And, Captain America was one of those things where people were like, why no matter what happens, Cap's going to be a good guy. And then, this happens and people are just like, this was my escape from this stuff in the real world.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, first off, not for nothing, Cap has gotten so much stuff from the right for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Because why are they writing Captain as some kind of peacenik, social justice warrior? As if being a warrior for a just society was a bad idea. Not for nothing, the idea that he is a warrior for a just society, that is essentially what a Captain America should be if we believe in the ideal of America as being a just society. He should be someone fighting for a just society, ergo a social justice warrior. And he's gotten this for so many years from these groups. And then when they did this heel turn, it's a heel turn. A character has to have a heel turn from time to time. Reed Richards has heel turns all the time.
Yeah. Plus what you got to remember, these characters have been around forever, but two, they've been around so long, you're getting different voices because how many different people have written these characters, especially Captain America. Captain America's been around since 1941.
I know, and there is, and honestly, if you really want to dig into this kind of nonsense, there is this quality of 1940s comic books written by young Jewish men, I'll admit. There is this thing that history gives us, which is a perspective that I think often gets forgotten about. Fascism was not a radical, or it was a radical idea in the 1930s and 40s, but it wasn't necessarily seen as a bad idea. A lot of people saw it was a bad idea, but there were people that were decent enough people that were saying, well, no, let's hear this out. What exactly is fascism? Especially if you think about a democratic fascism, the idea of, well, majority rules, and so whatever the majority says, that's how we operate our system, and you have a fascism of the majority, which immediately, having perspective of having to say, oh, that did not work out. That did not work out at all.
Well, I think that's why you got the comics of the 40s, because fascism wasn't seen by some people as completely evil, so that's why you got the comics that were propaganda. Well, kind of like propaganda. And back then they thought they were writing to just kids, so it's like, hey, kids, buy your war bonds and stomp a Nazi in the face or whatever.
Yeah, well, exactly, which is its own type of fascism, of course. Yeah. And of course, that's the thing, is like, you have to remember, like, when the Superman comes out, and Siegel and Schuster are creating Superman, and of course their first version of the Rise of the Superman is actually fairly fascistic. The actual original story of the Rise of the Superman, is relatively fascistic, about a person who gains psychic power. Basically, it's about Professor Xavier.
Mm.
It's actually basically the Ruins story. If you've ever read the Marvel series The Ruins, which is sort of this, what if everything in the Marvel universe just went wrong? And one of its central ideas is that Professor Xavier decides, I'm going to take over the world because I can. And it's just about how everything goes to heck once Professor Xavier takes over the world because he doesn't restrain himself. You know, when we talk about great power having great responsibility, part of that responsibility is not using your power. Part of that responsibility is recognizing that you don't want to be the monster. And, you know, but then again, comic books are filled with monsters.
Yeah, but I mean, that kind of power is seductive too, because, you know, if you see yourself as the good guy, you're like, you know, I have this power, and even though I'm going to have to, wield it over people like a club, I mean, when I do, people are going to be safe. Your kids are going to be safe. My kids are going to be safe. My neighbors are going to be safe, and blah, 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 blah.
And that is the seduction of Hydra.
Exactly.
And that is the crux of this. And that is the really complex question that Marvel is asking you to ask. Because when they did it with Osborn, it was easy to say, well, that's Norman Osborn. He's a bad guy. We know he's a bad guy. So we don't have to listen to what he might say.
Well, that's the whole thing with this Kobik thing. It really isn't that much of – she really didn't have to shift much. It's just, Steve Rogers' will and determination and everything is there. All she had to flip was, instead of the big thing in his life being the American dream, now it's Hydra.
Yeah.
But all his characteristics are there. Now they just serve a different goal.
And, there's a very interesting aspect of this that I think is maybe even overlooked. And it's arguably maybe a little Freudian. But, comic books are always Freudian. The one thing that differentiates – and I won't say the one thing, because there's many things that differentiate the Hydra Cap universe from the real universe, or the universe we've known up until this point. But one of the things it is that Kobik gave Steve back his mom.
Mm-hmm.
Told him that your mom didn't die, she wasn't frail and sickly. What you thought was the reality wasn't the reality. And for what it's worth, the Allies Cosmic Cube arguably from this perspective took away his mom, made her die, and not even not even a positive way. It is an interesting conundrum, and then you also have what is the other thematic within the Captain Hydra story, which is that Zemo gets his dad, and in both cases it's a lie. Zemo gets a dad. He gets told there was once a dad who loved him. Steve gets told there was a mom who lived. And that's the lie. And in order to choose the lie of being loved, you embrace this fascistic ideal. And, here's what I'll always say.
That's how you said these groups who shouldn't, who aren't in the right, that's how they seduce people. They say, well, look how much better your life is, on our side.
Exactly. And you know what? Here's what I'll say. I think there is this thrust of this, which is this idea that, good people become fascists.
Yeah.
They're not born fascist. Fascism isn't like being gay. You're not born a fascist. You come to fascism because things in your life make you make one choice then another, then another, then another, and you always think you're making the right choice until you realize you've made the wrong one.
That's the whole thing with any group, with any direction in your life. If someone convinces you, even if it's the wrong choice, hey, your life is going to be this is going to make your life much better. You join this group, you take this action, your life is going to be so much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But like I say, I don't think Marvel is sugarcoating this. I really don't. I really don't think Marvel has done anything to make you, if you're reading the books, to think that Steve Rogers is, like I said, he's selling Hydra as like any of the other charismatic villains in Marvel. And and that's what I always come back to is Marvel is chock-a-block with charismatic villains.
Well, yeah, I mean, you made the point before about Doctor Doom. It's the new Doctor Doom. Remember when he ruled Latveria? He's like, this is the best for my people, and this is the best thing I can provide for my people. They're safe, they're clothed, they're fed. They just basically have to bow and worship me. But besides that, hey, they have great lives.
Yeah, well, the crux, and here's what I'm going to say is the difference between Steve Rogers and Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom rules because he says, I am the smartest man in the room, so I will rule all, and every choice will be made by me, and everyone will be happy. Steve, even though he is the smartest man in the room, still isn't approaching things as if he is the smartest man in the room.
No, he believes in the dream, but not right now. It's Hydra.
Yes, and honestly, like I say, it is a beautiful deconstruction of fascism as much as anything. But you can't blame like I say, I get these people sitting there saying, Ike Perlmutter is a fascist, which is just, I mean, hey, he may be, and I guess in some terminology of fascism, which actually sits from a perspective of a corporatist state, in sort of your Italian fascism, your classical Italian fascism, maybe you can make that argument, but that isn't the racism and Nazism of German fascism. Because never let a German take up a bad idea, because we just run with it. We are
like David Hasselhoff.
No middle settings, man. That is the German people. We are people without middle settings. If you tell us to do, if we do something, we're going to do it better than anyone. You give us beer, we're going to make the best beer in the world. You give us cars, we're going to make fantastic cars. You give us racism and fascism, you know what? You're going to get Nazis. You're going to get racism and fascism so bad, you actually have to come up with a new word to define it. I'm a German, man. We're not people you can trust with bad ideas. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, but anyway, but like I said, I don't think Marvel has sat there trying to tell you, hey, Cap is right. People will say Cap is right. Just like there were people who said Osborn was right, myself among them. Because I think there is some truth to what he's saying in that superheroic world that, maybe there needs to be some greater control on things. That's what the Civil War was all about. Whether or not there needs to be some kind of system in place. And, when you're dealing with this idea of absolute freedom versus absolute anarchy, there's got to be a middle ground. Just like you can't have people owning nuclear weapons, even though you have a right to bear arms, And I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe you have a right to bear arms, I just don't think that, I think that there are reasonable things you could say. Well, are you a sociopath? Do you want to commit do you want to commit a crime with this weapon? I think that's a fair question to ask, And saying, oh, you can't ask me that question. That's a violation of my civil rights. It's like, why is that a violation of your civil rights? Have you committed crimes with weapons before? These are all valid questions, I think. Not to prevent people from getting guns, but just to prevent people that might be looking to cause mayhem from getting guns or nuclear weapons. Because again, like I say, it's like, if you want to have absolute freedom, where is the end point? And of course we don't want absolute control of things. We don't want a world in which, you can't own a butter knife without, written permission of the state. You want someplace in the middle where, things that are tools can be purchased and things that are dangerous can still be purchased, but maybe are a little more controlled to make sure you are a responsible enough adult to have that weapon, If you want to have an AK-47 because you think it's a cool gun and you're a gun enthusiast and you like to shoot guns that make big bangs, it's not for me to judge. I just want to make sure that, okay, before you buy that, you're not going to shoot at school, right? You're not going to shoot up your workplace, right? You are getting your certifications and you've got that thing, Just like if I want to drive an 18-wheeler, I can't just go down to a lot and buy an 18-wheeler. I got to get, licensed for that. Because that's a big vehicle. Even if I have the best intentions, an idiot driving an 18-wheeler is just as deadly as an idiot with an AK-47. The idiot with the AK-47 didn't want to hurt nobody, just like the idiot in an 18-wheeler didn't want to hurt nobody. But when people get hurt, you got to sort of say, okay, well, can we have a system in place to make sure that, you know, the guy who wants that isn't going to hurt anyone, himself or others. But that's freedom and security. And when suddenly people are shooting laser beams out of their eyes, it gets a lot more complex in the comic book universe. I don't even know if I've made my point at this point, but I do know that I think people are way too upset about Captain America doing a heel turn, because people turn evil, man. It's like, you know, it's saying, oh, but he was Captain America. It's like, yeah, what? You know what? Not for nothing, as I said during the all-new Marvel Roundup, you can ask Red Wolf how what a hero a guy named Captain America probably is. You know, you know, it's like, oh, you mean that country that slaughtered all my people? Yeah, I'm sure he's real trustworthy. You know, America is built on the skulls of many people. You know, maybe having a fascist Captain America finally is just being honest with ourselves. Think about that for a minute. Turn it all around, man. Okay. I knew there was another topic I wanted to talk about, but we do not have time tonight, Phil. So we're going to have to save that crazy fan theory for another week. Phil, do you have anything you want to add before we close this lowest rated episode of Superconnectivity out for the week?
No, I think it was interesting, and no, I think we hit all the points on this. But no, I think this was very interesting. I think people will dig deep into this, especially Kenneth Smyson.
I hope so. Phil, if anyone wants to talk to you, talk about why you hang out with that awful Nazi Charlie Esser, how can they reach you and sympathize and help you get out like so much Melania Trump, whatever her name is?
If you want to follow me in the right up to the greatness of Charlie Esser, you can always email me, nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am at nightwingpdp. And we mentioned our new home coming in June, Capes and Lunatics. So follow us there, facebook.com/Capes and Lunatics, at Capes Lunatics on Twitter. And we're even going to have voicemail, so send it in. Maybe we'll even have a contest for best voicemail. 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES.
And, of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way, where Mods and Pods once did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And follow me on the Twitters as I live tweet all sorts of things at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the two E's in the middle for quality. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not fascists. We do not play fascists on TV. We just try to find the connections and make comic books with you. Good night.